welcome to this fourth edition of Spiritual Conversations. And in this episode, I talked to Kenyata White. She is the author of the book Church, the Awakening, and she has quite a story. She was born into a cult, and a Christian cult, and ended up suppressing a bunch of memories from the oppression and trauma that she experienced as a child growing up in this. And the book tells her story of her childhood, which came back to her later on in life, and then she pursued a magical path in order to find healing and self-awareness and self-actualization. So one of the mistakes that I made as a pastor, and one of the mistakes that I think we make in general in the Christian community, is that we only listen to people who agree with us. And Stephen Covey, in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he points out that one of the characteristics that we should seek to cultivate within ourselves is the ability to seek to understand before we seek to be understood. So I want to invite you to listen to the conversation. It's going to shock and surprise some of you, the content of it, I'm sure. But I want to invite you to listen with an open mind and open heart, with the attitude of seeking to understand, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. And I want to encourage you to get the book. But without any further delay, let's go ahead and go to the conversation.
Okay.
Hi, and welcome to this fourth edition of Spiritual Conversations. I have with me a very special guest today, and her name is Kenyata White. She is the author of the book Church, the Awakening. And Kenyata, I just read your book. I want to thank you for joining me. And why don't you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and about your book?
Okay. So yes, my name is Kenyatta. I just turned 46 this year. I live in Arizona, in Phoenix, Arizona, where I pursue a career in as a performance artist and also a health and fitness coach, which I really, really love. And I also mentor some people in the magical arts as well. And I do a lot of talks and things on magic and spirituality. So yeah, let's just jump into my book called Church, the Awakening. So this book I wrote as fiction, and it's based on a true story. So we were talking earlier, and I said that I had changed a few things in there just to kind of protect people and things like that in the story, but it is based off of a true story. And the reason that I wrote the book was I just had to. It was healing. It was something that just kind of happened when I was. It's about growing up in a cult and the experiences that I had growing up in a cult, and I had no memory of any of it. Once I was older, and in my early 20s, I moved to Phoenix, and I had no recollection of anything in my past, and I was okay with that. Like, people would be able to talk about their lives, or when I was this age, this happened, and they would ask, well, what did you do when you were in your your preteens or whatever, and I was just like, I don't really remember, and that would just end like that. So I was living my life like that for many years. And then when I hit my 30s, one of the people that was in the cult with me kind of grew up in the cult as well. And she had also escaped, somehow contacted me, got my information, contacted me, and she just triggered all of these memories. She started kind of talking about things that had happened, and it triggered all these memories, and it was just kind of like a flood of my entire life came back to me, and I literally just pretty much lost my mind for a little while there, and went a little bit crazy because of all the traumatic things that had happened and that I had seen. So yeah, that's what the book is about.
Yeah, it was really a riveting read as I read it. And I knew that you had written it because I had heard you in a previous interview talk about how you wrote it as part of your healing process. And it's not uncommon for people who've had really traumatic experiences to block those those things out. So I knew, there had to be some pretty bad stuff in there. But even reading it, I was shocked at some of the things that took place. And I want to say too, it was a cult, but it was a Christian cult. It was very charismatic. Lots of what I think a lot of my viewers come out of that background, and so there was a lot of the manifestations of what we would call the gifts of the Spirit, supposedly, the gift of prophecy, where God would speak, but he would order people to do all kinds of kind of crazy things and really almost criminal things, and very traumatic for you. And so as I was reading the book, I was riveted by it, but also I could feel the healing in it. One of the things, that I would commend you on, Kenyatta, when you wrote it, what doesn't come out in the book is a lot of bitterness or anger. You're simply telling the story. And I really felt, like I could feel the healing that was taking place. Do you want to share a couple of episodes so people have an idea kind of how extreme it was?
Absolutely. So I'll preface it by saying when I was growing up, and when I did get to an age where I could go to school and be around other people that were not part of the cult, because the people of the cult were constantly around. Like there was I can't remember one single time when it was just me, my father, my mother, and my sisters. There was always 3 or 4 cult members in the house. And so I just thought that was the way of life of everyone in the world, so I would start saying things or talking about things that had happened in my home life. And then I realized that that's not what everybody does, and I should probably stop talking. Yeah. So one of the things that really still stick out to me is my mother was very powerful, and I was being groomed to one day take her place and keep the cult running. And so I was kind of like the princess. And I was very tiny. I'm very tiny right now, but I was very tiny. And there was a ritual or something that they were doing where they built this huge altar, and it was white.
Yeah.
And my mother was dressed in all white, and the cult members it was the throne, or the throne, I guess you could call it. The altar was upstairs, and the cult members were downstairs preparing to do whatever it is they were going to do. And so it was in this room. The entire house was dark, but in this room was the white throne, and my mother dressed in white on the throne. And it just seems so immaculate to me, because I'm just, I'm looking up at this. No one can see me in the room because it was all dark, but so I'm looking up at my mother, and it's just like, I swear there was a spotlight on her, just like making this whole thing illuminated. And one by one, the members would come in, and I don't know if it was just because I was so fascinated at what I was seeing. I mean, it's almost like she was floating, and they were below her. And she would say words to them. And the only thing that I could remember her saying is, you're not allowed to say or speak of anything that we talk about in here. It stays between you and me. So no one was able to talk about anything that her and the other person had spoke of. And so after that, there was always kind of like these beating ceremonies where you'd have to get beaten up or hit with a belt or a cord or an ironing cord or something, to where you get, hell beat out of you, or whatever you're getting beat out of you. There was a beating ceremony along with that. Yeah. Wow. And so I guess it was kind of a cleansing thing or whatever. And I remember we would always there was always different meetings. There was the women's meetings, there was the men's meetings, there was the ministers' meetings. I was an ordained minister by 14 years old.
Wow.
So I was preaching my first sermons at like 12, and I was into it. But there would be the women's meetings, and the women would have to, I guess they would conjure evil, conjure Satan, if you will. and one of the other women had to, and it would get pretty heavy. Like the woman would definitely transform. The smell of sulfur would, and I mean, it was very potent. Like I can even smell it right now just talking about it.
Wow.
Yeah, and she would transform into the evil or the devil or whatever the other woman was supposed to fight, and this other woman's supposed to see this as, you know, her overcoming what the devil represents. And so they would just beat each other's asses until, I mean, there was plugs of hair
Oh my gosh,
everywhere, like
wow.
blood, and like everyone was just cheering them on. Yeah, you can do it. Come on. Like just cheering and cheering. And afterwards, man, they were unrecognizable.
So I have a question for you, because one of the things that came out in your book, and of course my background is, you know, a charismatic Christian. I was pastor for a lot of years, and one of the things that you describe in your book is these sort of exorcisms where, you know, like you described, the women would change forms, you would smell the sulfur, that kind of thing. There was one particular incident you talked about in the book where there was a lady who, I don't know, was dressing what the church leadership would consider to be provocatively and maybe flirting with some of the men or whatever, and then later goes through this like exorcism. So do you view that, with your understanding now, as a real exorcism, in the sense that there was a being inhabiting those people that was being set free, or do you view it, as you said a moment ago, as, because of the nature of what was going on, more a conjuring up of something that wasn't there before, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that maybe she was dressing provocatively. Maybe that, you know, that story was true, but I truly believe that it was a power thing. And it was a conjuring up of things, because I mean, if you can conjure it up, like it exists. I've seen it with my own eyes, and so, so I believe that my mother was having fun with her power.
Yeah,
you know, having fun with getting everybody riled up to conjure this up, because I don't think it was necessary. But I think. I really believe it was just playing with the power and playing with the people, and using their energy and using that force to get this spirit or this demon to enter the body.
wow, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for explaining that. So one of the other things that you talk about is at some point in your teenage years, you got interested in, was it Wicca or was it some other form of magic? And talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Okay, yeah, definitely. I was definitely interested in witchcraft. I had, ever since I can remember, I'd always been an earth, air, fire, water spirit. I always watched witch movies. I was just always fascinated with witchcraft. And in my book, I talk about this little secret area in my room that I discovered. And you couldn't see it. It was kind of part of the wall. And I don't really know how I discovered it, because you couldn't see it if you didn't know where it was.
Wow.
And so I would gather things, like I gathered a Ouija board, I gathered crystals, I gathered any oils, anything that made me feel connected. I gathered it and I put it in this under this room. It was kind of under the stairs. And I would go in there, and I mean, I was just as powerful as my mother, and I would just play with, I mean, I've always been a seer as well.
Okay.
Ever since I was a kid, I could see things, and people would be like, I'd be talking to someone, and people would be like looking at me like, what are you talking to? And so I was able to go into my secret place and conjure things up and use my spirit board and talk to all the, you know, and see what I wanted to see. And when I was young, you know, I was playing with fire, and it bit me back. You know, there was times where I probably dabbled in things I probably shouldn't have, and it backfired on me. You know, so.
Yeah, the contrast to me is amazing, because you have your mom in the church on the one hand, which is taking a very extreme approach to, I guess, sin or holiness or righteousness or whatever terminology that they use. And yet here
Mhm.
you are as, you know, the daughter of the pastor, and you're messing with Ouija boards and scrying magic mirrors and doing all kinds of things. And that contrast to me
Totally.
was just so amazing.
Right? Yeah. And you know what? She actually, I think I say this in the book, but I had it hidden for a while. You know, that was my secret place. I'd come home after school, throw my bag off, and go straight there. You know, and I came home, threw my bag off, was about to go straight there, and she was in my room and had found
Oh my
everything.
gosh.
Yeah, I was devastated. She wrapped it all up and threw it out.
Wow. So then
Yeah.
later on in your life, after I mean, well, I don't want to give any spoilers on the book, but you end up in Arizona, and
Hmm.
then that's kind of where the journey, or that part of the journey, ends. I'm hoping you write a sequel. But
Right. Absolutely.
but I know at some point you got interested in Aleister Crowley and the OTO, and maybe talk. Now, I have to preface, a lot of my viewers may not even know who Aleister Crowley is, and those
Right.
who do certainly are not going to have a favorable view of Aleister Crowley. They're going to see him as a great beast, and
Absolutely.
one very evil. So maybe talk a little bit about your journey into that, if you don't mind.
Okay. Absolutely. So yeah, once I kind of like stayed away from magic, stayed away from witchcraft for a while, as I was healing and just kind of getting back to just kind of living my life away from all of it. And then down the road, I just had this urge. I needed it. I saw something witchy, or I went into a metaphysical store or something, and then it just kind of sparked me again. And so I just kept seeking and asking Spirit to guide me, because I knew I felt like I knew I was different,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to seek that out. And so I was just washing dishes one day, and I felt the urge to go to the metaphysical store. I walked in, I saw the little red book, and I grabbed it, and it was the only one there. And I went home and I read it cover to cover, and it was the one Aleister Crowley wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't understand the damn word, but it, for some reason, it just made sense to a different part of me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I started digging into Flema, and my first mentor came to me because I reached out to a Thelema group, and everyone was kind of a little arrogant in there, you know, and I was asking
Mm-hmm.
questions, and they're kind of being kind of jerky. But this one guy, he's like, hey, he reached out and he started talking to me and started mentoring me, and I just felt like I started reading more and more about Thelema, and I just felt this like connection. And I was like, yes, I found it. Like, this is it. This is what I need to be doing. This is what I need to study. And so I just really went heavy into it. I wrote so many papers and so many commentaries on the workings of Aleister Crowley, and it was just fascinating to me. And I learned so much, and I just felt like I found my tribe, if you will.
Yeah. So
And
if I can interrupt you just real quick, what
yeah.
was it? What was it specifically? Was there one or two things specifically that resonated with you or that drew you to the work of Aleister Crowley as you were doing this?
Okay. So, first it was the Book of the Law, and then just the workings, like Liber Astarte, and just all of his different workings were brilliant, I thought. I mean, some of his readings, I thought he was kind of a dick, but
Yeah.
he was brilliant though.
Right.
And I did a lot of his magical workings, and they were amazing. Like, it worked. You know, I was like, oh my gosh, this is real magic. Like, it fucking works. so, so I was fascinated by his workings, and so I really dug deep into them. And my mentor gave me a lot of his different workings to do and to study. And so every time each one that I did, it just resonated with me, you know, and I really enjoyed it. And so then I found out about the mass, and I drove all the way to California because I didn't know where anybody was here. And my friend who was my mentor at the time, told me to come there. So I got in the car, drove to LA, and went to a mass, went to a class before that. And I just felt so like, oh my gosh, I am surrounded by other magicians. Like, we all are magicians. Like, okay, people do magic for real. It's not just me. So I felt really connected in that sense, and that I found others that can go deep, can really talk about real magic. Like, I'm not going to look like a freak if I say, well, I had a conversation with Lucifer last night, and although that did happen. Although when I just start talking about the real deep things that happened to me, my experience with Set and with Lilith, and it kind of petered off a little bit once I started getting a little bit more deeper into the groups.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I started to become a little disappointed in the groups in Thelema, because I felt it wasn't what I was doing, and when I was doing the workings and the results that I was getting. I felt like if everyone else was doing the work, like not the same result, but we should have the same intensity of results, regardless if it's different results or not. But it just seemed very mechanical. And I'm like, because I'm at mass, I'm like, where's the magic at? Like, I'm ready to see, shit. Do it,
So take a minute and just talk to our viewers a little bit about magic. And here's how I want to set this up, because a lot of them, again, are coming from a Christian background, and all of this is, just completely evil and deception and demons, and yet here you come from, it was a cult, but it had a biblical foundation. It had Christian principles and things like that. You saw and witnessed deliverances or exorcisms growing up, and yet here you are. So maybe, how would you define magic, or what misconceptions might you be able to clear up?
For me, and I think if people can let this sink in and try to understand it, magic, the purpose of magic, and to practice these rituals and to do things that you may conjure up something, or you may see the thing move on the Ouija board. The purpose of magic is to get the carnal mind to believe that other things are possible outside of this realm.
Okay.
That weird shit can happen. So that's the practice of magic, because it will happen, And then your mind, because it's kind of hard for the human mind, especially when you've been conditioned to believe only one thing. If you practice magic, if you put some of these magical things in place, using sigils, doing rituals, mantras, all that stuff, then you are training your mind to open up and realize that what you are stuck in is not the only thing.
Okay.
Because I've done many different forms of magic, so that's my take on what is magic and why is it important.
So it sounds like what you're talking about then is an expansion of human consciousness, and an opening up of really what we're capable of, or what the potential is as a human being on a spiritual level. Would that be an accurate summation of what you just said?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Now I know, again, Aleister Crowley, I think he went by the term the Great Beast or something like that. I think his mother gave him that. I think, again, people who come from a certain, definitely, Christian viewpoint are going to say, well, that's just, that's who he was. I mean, he was just completely evil, and whatever the case may be. But as and I've only done a cursory view of some of who he was and his works, but it seems to me that he was raised, if I'm correct in this, he was raised with a very kind of radical fundamentalist mother, who I think gave him the name the Great Beast, or the Beast, or something like that. And it seems to me that he was kind of rebelling against some of that. But the whole idea of, do what thou wilt is not necessarily just going around like Aladdin with the lamp, just getting any wish that you want, but really an expansion of the true and deeper self. Is that accurate?
Right. Yes. Yes. People have even Thelemites have taken the do what thou wilt to a level. It's just like, guys, I mean, that's not what he means. He doesn't mean go and have like 50,000 orgies and, kill people or whatever the case may be. It means, first of all, you have to know who you are and know that you are not this avatar, flesh.
Mm-hmm.
You have to know that. And once you know that, then you can do what thou wilt, because you will know your true will and what that is.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. So a lot of people, I think their misconception of magic is, putting curses on people so that they die, cursing your enemies, putting love spells on people that don't have any interest in you, so that they'll
Right.
so that they'll sleep with you
Right.
or fall in love with you, fortune telling and profiting off of fortune telling and stuff like that. I think those are a lot of the misconceptions. And one of the things that I think is unfortunate from especially the Christian realm is, and everybody does this, it's not just Christians, but we develop a certain when you become indoctrinated in any system or religion, you create a narrative within your mind that creates the character that you are. So if from the Christian perspective, and even in your book, from perhaps your mom's perspective, perhaps she was the voice of God to those people, and to obey her when she was under the unction of the Holy Spirit was to obey God. And so that narrative, you create an entire script that says, there's God, there's good, there's evil. It's all dualistic. And we're on the right side and we're fighting these cosmic forces, and your whole identity becomes built in that. And so when people come and challenge those concepts and challenge those precepts, it creates so much cognitive dissonance, because it's not just a tenant like believing in Santa Claus, who comes once a year or whatever, but it's your entire structure narrative of your worldview. And so it's very easy then when to look at things that are different, or look at things that are seemingly in opposition, and because of the cognitive dissonance that creates, not really listen and not really seek to understand what's going on. And so I think a lot of people dismiss the various aspects of magic because it's just comfortable.
Right. Yep.
But it seems like from what I understand, and again from listening to you, that we're talking about transforming yourself as much as creating maybe shit that happens on the outside or whatever, the weird shit, but there's a transformation of the self that takes place. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yes, there's definitely a transformation of self that takes place. And, with the spells, the love spells, all that stuff, sometimes those are necessary, because you got to start little, you got to start with the baby steps. And that kind of, if it happens, you're like, whoa, okay, okay, this is cool.
Yeah.
But the main thing, the main deal, even when you're doing those lower level magic spells, because that's all they are, it's just lower level magic. It's not,
right.
It's going to do its little thing and then it's over. But you have to, going into magic, doing any kind of thing magical, the goal should be to have more knowledge of self. That should be the end goal.
Okay.
Because whatever happens between you setting up whatever you're doing and to the end goal, whatever magic happens, whatever experience you have with any entities or anything, it's all because the only thing you want, the only deep desire you have, is to have more knowledge of self. And then you will have a plethora of immense experiences, and you won't close yourself off. You won't be like, okay, I want this car, that's why I'm doing this spell. That's just, it's closing you off to so much more, to actually living. So for me, the end goal, when I tell my students, the end goal is always, you want to know more of self, period.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. Mm-hmm. That's the only reason you're doing magic.
Yeah. I think that's a good. I think that's a good clarification for people that are out there who, just automatically assume that it's all this filled with this wicked and evil intention, and kind of the Hollywood version of it, I guess.
Right. Yeah, and that's another thing, like TV and Hollywood and all that stuff, make it look evil, and make it look, crazy or whatever. But we all try to get to the same thing, you know what I'm saying? But everybody learns differently. Everybody's got their own. I love it all. I love the incense. I love the sage. I love the cape. I love the whole setup. That's just me. I'm an actress. Okay. I can't help it. And some people just like to get on their knees and pray,
Right.
But magic works for me. I love mirror magic. I love using my power of being able to see, that works for me. It's not evil. It's just what works for me.
Yeah. So with the discovery of self, can you talk a little bit about how it's benefited you, how it's benefited your life? Because again, you mentioned at the beginning about blocking out your childhood, and I'm also a mental health counselor as well as a pastor, and so I devoted a lot of study to psychology and mental health, and especially trauma and trauma recovery. And again, it's not uncommon at all for when you have a traumatic childhood, especially, to block those things out as a means of surviving. And then inevitably, when you're ready to deal with those things will begin to surface, and you'll go through, kind of a crazy time. You talk about kind of, maybe feeling like you lost your mind or something at some point when those memories came back. Was there any aspect of your magical practices that helped you heal from some of those things?
Yes, I did a year-long working with a Zenith Mason of Draconian magic, and so that's more dark shadow magic.
Okay.
And I did a year long, so it was every day for 1 year. I was completely saturated. Like I told my partner at the time, this is like, I told him what I was doing. It might shake up my world. Like, it was a big deal for me. I didn't just like, I'm going to do this. This sounds cool. Like, I had a big long interview with Athena's. I had to write a paper before even getting into it, but I was being led to visit my darkness.
Okay.
And embrace it.
Okay.
And so, and it was hard. It was definitely hard. It shook my world up. It totally, like, if my world was a snow globe that hadn't been shaken up in a while, it like got all shaken up. And pretty much, like, took me all the way back down. Well, not all the way back down, but it just showed me the other side of myself. And you know what? Ascension and knowing who you are and the desire to get there, it's not for the weak, man. It's not for the weak. If you're going to do it, yeah, it's not for the weak. Like, you got to want it more than breath. You have to want it more than your own breathing to get through it.
Yeah.
And so visiting my shadow side, doing that whole year, working and really going deep into dark magic and blood magic, and like really embracing it, I found my light.
Wow. Now explain that if you can. Elaborate on that if you don't mind. You found your light.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, I found when I say I found my light, I'll give you an example. I'll tell you the story of my visit with Set, the God, the son of God. Okay, so I had many of these. So my first visit with Set, this was during the year-long working with the Zenith Mason. And so I built this huge portal with this huge sigil on it, and this is what I would go into every single night. And so this week happened to be my working with Set. So I think this was the third night with him. And I would call him in, and I would go into trance state, and I would meet him in the desert. And so at this time, I'm in the desert. My mouth is all bloody and cracked. There's sand all over me, sand in my eyes. I look like hell. I feel like hell. There's no way I can get up. I just have been beat down by my own hands, by everything that was holding me down, everything that I hated about myself, whatever the case may be. I just felt completely loaded down and just dirty. And Set was at the other end of the desert, And I can feel him saying, you need to get up. You need to get up. Like, he's not going to help me get up, but you need to get up. And I felt like I couldn't do it. I just felt like, but there was a tiny little glimmer, mustard seed of hope inside of me that got me up, you know, and I walked over, frail, skinny, like I'm there. This is not a dream. Like, I am feeling the pain. And so I walk over to him, and I'm standing in front of him looking like hell. And his eyes, he's looking at me in the eyes, and his eyes come to the front, and both eyes become one eye, and then the one eye becomes his entire body. And I get sucked into this eye, and I feel this warmness, and I feel as if I am a fetus inside of a womb.
Wow.
And then I am rebirthed. I'm shot out of the eye, just as if it was a birth, with all the birth stuff all over me. And then I shoot out of my body, and I'm looking down at Set and myself, and as I'm being born. And so as I see this, I see the birth, I come back down to my body levitates, and Set shoots me back up into the sky, and I'm encompassed by this dome, and inside this dome there's thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of doors, and every time you open one door, there's thousands of doors in that door. So there's thousands of doors inside of thousands of doors. It's like it's never ending. And so I'm just like looking at all of these doors, and I had an intimate encounter with Set, which is not human at all. Like, I can't even describe intimacy with God, as you know, it's different. So I know we can't even really think about it. You just have to have the experience. You have to have the experience. So I had that, and I was at my lowest point, and I got myself up. I faced it. I saw that there are a million doors and opportunities in my life, and I rose up. And so the next night when I met Set, when I got up from that night, there was bruises on me. My lips were cracked. I couldn't walk. Like, I had to take a couple aspirin because I was beat up. And then the next day, when I went back into trance and met Set, I looked so hot. I had this like sexy leather outfit on. I had two cougars on the side of me. Like, I walked right up to him, and it was just like this energy of like, well, you know, let's have a drink and sit down and talk about it. You know, and that's when I felt like, yeah, I conquered it. Like, I'm up here with Set, you know? Yeah. So that's like going through the darkness to get to that, like, you know, yeah, I made it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. How has your life been different since then?
That's a good question. Man, I tell you, the experiences get more and more incredibly intense. Once I have an intense experience, because I'm constantly, every day, I get up, I thank Spirit for everything, and I crave them. I crave these experiences, and you know, I spend a lot of time alone, which I'm okay with, because I'm pretty fucking weird. I'm pretty weird, man. You know, and I still freak people out when I talk, and but it's changed my life to the point where, for one, I know I'm never alone. Never. You know, I never feel like, God, I'm so alone, and that had to work up to that. I had to realize there's a certain realization when you really know who you are. There's a certain joy with that, where you're just like, I'm never alone. I'm so happy, no matter like what the circumstances, like in my 3-dimensional life, no matter what the circumstances, I have this experience to back up how cool my life is.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting. I want to focus on that. You said that you're really happy, because again, from the paradigm that a lot of people are coming out of, oh no, you can't be happy. This leads to misery and depression. And, I'm sure there are instances where people open doors and mess with things that they're not ready for and whatever, that,
Right.
take control of their life and produce, negative results for them. But
Mhm.
you're talking about a journey that you gave yourself to completely, that has really borne some lasting happiness and fruit for you in your life. And I think that's wonderful.
Right. Yes, it's amazing. And that's the only thing. You just got to want it more than anything. And when you want it more than anything, everything else in your life just flows. You
Yeah.
can't be scared. You just have to jump into the unknown and just trust.
So talk to us a little bit, if you don't mind, about your worldview from a metaphysical standpoint. You talk about thanking spirit, and yet you also talk about working with different gods, Set being one of them, obviously, you just talked about. You talked about, magic opening yourself up to realize that there's something outside of this three-dimensional world in which we live. So what's your sort of overarching metaphysical worldview? If that's not too big of a
Well,
question. Too
not at
general.
all, not at all. No, I totally get it. So when I say thank you, Spirit, that is kind of like that's my way to relate to everyone else.
Okay.
That's my relation to, if they think it's Jesus, cool. If they think it's God, cool. I think it's Lilith sometimes. Sometimes I think it's, Hecate. That's just me. But I'm saying thank you, Spirit, out loud and on social media to be relatable.
Okay.
That doesn't mean a certain entity for me.
Okay.
And I've had many paranormal experiences. I've seen some crazy stuff, so sometimes I kind of like, well, I've seen this, so, who really is spirit? I still have my questions as far as like this God thing and like putting it all together. But there's just so much that you can't label it one thing. It's just impossible. It's completely impossible. And if you can open your mind up to it, you'll see and realize there's always going to be a question. There's always going to be like, what about this? There's not one thing you can just be like, this is what it is.
Yeah.
Because you will be shown that no, it's not.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so what happens after death in your mind? Do you have any ideas about that?
Well, once I leave this body, I'm not really sure where I'll go. I have some ideas where I'll visit and where I'll go back to. I'm not sure if I'll come back, in this dimension.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not afraid. Like I'm excited. I want to know. Like I'm not afraid of death. I feel like people really take death to a level of, yes, we have our three-dimensional minds. We're human. We will have those feelings, and I think those are valid because this is where we are. This is where we live, and it's a blessing to be able to feel that. But I don't believe I'm going to have a death, so to speak, just a transformation out of this body, because I know, like I used to say I know who I am, but I know that if I step out of this body, it's just going to fall to the floor. So it's not that I'm going to die and not, and nothing's going to happen. I just feel like, I'm just going to transform into wherever I need to go next, or, fulfill this other soul contract on this plane, whatever it is. It's just an ongoing, it's not.
Yeah, that's one of the things I've noticed that's consistent among spiritual practitioners, no matter what path they've taken, is it really does free you from that fear of death. Because especially, I think, if you've experienced, it's one thing to be sitting in, churches or places where people are simply on an intellectual level indoctrinating you or telling you certain things. But when you've experienced those other realms, those other realities you've experienced, out of body type of phenomena. It seems people who come from that place of experience have less fear of death and more freedom than people who haven't.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, because you just experience, you're like, oh, okay. All right, that's cool. I can deal with that. But yeah, to not have the experience, and I'm not saying call it into yourself, but it does make a difference if you give yourself permission to have a crazy experience. Most people are just afraid. They're afraid, to have something crazy happen, or to see something that, looks like a ghost, or whatever the case may be. But you just have to give yourself permission to have a super crazy, magical, wild, out of the blue experience. And then I think you'll understand why you're here, what you really are, and where you really might go to.
So I know I have a lot of viewers. Again, like I mentioned, not all my viewers, but a lot of them come from a Christian background. And a lot of them, again, their narrative, their worldview has been completely shaken up in the last few years. That seems to be a trend right now with a lot of people that I'm hearing from every week, different people from around the world on Facebook, or, on the YouTube channel, or other avenues that we put out there. So I know there's a lot of people that are kind of leaving one sort of spiritual paradigm, if you will. And there's so much out there now. There's so much you can get in terms of books and the internet, and it's just overwhelming. And there's so many gurus, and there's so many, you can go to holistic fairs and find everything from legit stuff to people that just think it's a way to make money to stuff that really impacts you, to stuff that's like, why the hell did I pay for that? So maybe if you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to speak to people who are kind of leaving one realm and they're looking at something else, maybe dabbling a little bit, maybe afraid a little bit. Maybe what would you say to them? What are some of the dangers? What are some of the, what advice might you give that person who's saying, I have some interest in spiritual things, but I don't know where to begin?
Okay. What the advice I would give is, dabbling's okay, but if you're going to go into it, if you're going to try it, you have to understand and know that you're going to shake things up regardless. It's going to get shaken up. You're going to change your life. It's going to change. That's it. So I would suggest all or nothing.
Wow.
I would suggest just go straight into it, or don't do it at all. Like, it has to be a complete lifestyle change. Like, you're going to, like, what I have my students do is a 13-day ritual that I created to put death to old ways of thinking. And it's pretty intense. And a lot of students couldn't get through it. They stopped on the third day because it's just too much.
Wow.
And so that's why I say, but they already went to 3 days. So now they have this knowledge. They know that they could have so now you have this torture of thinking about, man, well, I wish I would have did that, or you're stagnant into where you stop.
Wow.
That's why you should just go all the way, because now you're stuck here in phase number 3, and there's really nothing you can do about it, because you were told in the beginning, all or nothing. And I think that's where people get messed up, is that dabbling is not a good idea. I would say just don't do it. Just don't buy books. And if you are going to go into it, just ask. I'm not going to even say ask anything. I'm just going to say just ask.
Put your intention out, maybe, huh?
Put your intention out. I want to know. I want more knowledge of self. I want to know who I am. Be very specific, clear. Even if you can't even think of the words, your intention and your desire will be heard and acknowledged. And so that's where I would start, is putting the intention out there and asking, and it'll come to you. It will just come to you. It'll come to you, and you'll be searching for it so much. It's the only thing you're going to care about. when you really want it, it's going to be the only thing that is on your mind. I mean, you're going to be able to cook and like do your stuff and have a life. But I mean, when I was cooking dinner, I was thinking about the ritual or everything, exercise. And I'm thinking I have to work out because when I do the ritual, my body can't take it. So my body needs to be strong. Everything I do is involved in magic and reaching knowledge of higher self. Every single thing, every aspect of my life is that. And,
Okay.
And you know, like, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think one of the challenges or one of the pitfalls is that like there's sort of the, let's say, self-initiation path, where let's say you pick an area that you want to focus on and you dive into, let's just take, for example, Nordic magic, because that's kind of a trend and popular right now or whatever. So somebody wants to indoctrinate themselves maybe in that. And so they get books and they watch YouTube videos and they do whatever's available to them in that moment. And I think there's certain pitfalls or dangers, I think, in sort of that self-initiation type of approach. But on the flip side, and I think you might validate this from your own experience, you can find mentors or teachers or orders or whatever that are not healthy, that end up being just as cultish as what you left. And so a person can be left there with kind of a dilemma. Do I go this on my own, or do I just, so I wonder, do you kind of have the mentality, that old Chinese proverb, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, that when you put that intention out into the universe, then there will be synchronicities or things that will happen that will bring things across your path that will help you in your particular path or journey. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I do believe in that philosophy as far as when the student's ready, the teacher will appear. I do also believe that it depends on the level of your desire and the level of your belief. So say, for example, I'm going to go into it this way. You know what? I'm going to try this magic thing. I just want to see if it's really going to happen. Like, I mean, really, because people talk about it. I just want to see. So that level of desire and expectation of some outcome that you've built up in your mind, because you're expecting an outcome, because you just want to see, you're going to probably get something false because you've already built it up in your mind. You're already upset about it. You already don't believe. You want something to validate your belief or like make you believe. So you are prone to a false mentor or a false prophet or something false coming to you because you're already going in with some sort of, the magic owes you. So that's what you're going to get. That's what you're going to get. So, and magic and spirit, or whatever you want to call it, knows that, like, you are that. So what you're putting out there is going to come to you. So if you have pure, clean desire, like, I just want to know, please just show me, it's going to come to you.
Wow.
Because it's pure. It's pure desire.
Right.
So pure, it's just going to come to you purely because of the intention of your heart, the intention of your soul. It's just going to happen. There's no other way. You will not get false prophet if you go into it with pure desire. Which
brings us back to knowing self. And,
yep.
One of the things, I was reading a book on alchemy, and one of the, it's funny because you get these books and 99% of it is crap. But there's like that 1% that is a gold nugget or something that kind of stays with you and changes your life, right? And and so I was reading this book on alchemy, and one of the one gold nugget that I took from it was, the person said, you should not judge your desires based on whether they are good or evil. So many people negate or really shut off and create. Really, I think that's where a lot of that shadow self or a lot of our subconscious conflicts come from, because we have this pre-programmed morality that's been given to us because of our family, because of our religion, whatever the case may be. And things might begin to emerge from our hearts, from our authentic self, and immediately that programmed self begins to judge it as, oh, that's evil, or that's bad, or I can't want that for myself. And you negate that. And so this author said, when you're dealing with genuine desire, which is where I believe, that what you're talking about, that clean intention of, I really want this, is talking about that genuine desire. And she says, don't ask if it's good or evil, but ask if it's authentic. And that's what I hear you saying, that like the path begins with doing enough internal work and it being brutally honest with yourself and saying, what is it that I actually genuinely deeply desire? And if I can get in touch with those deep, authentic desires, that becomes like a guidance system that then can open up the pathway for synchronicities to cause the universe, God, spirit, whatever you want to call it, to bring into my experience in this world something that matches the frequency of what I desire. But that requires stripping away all of the BS, all the bullshit that we tell ourselves, and being authentic with ourselves and being real with God, or whatever we choose to call it, and say, this is what I really want, and then putting it out there and really being able to then give the rest of yourself to that and watch what happens as a result.
Absolutely. Yes, exactly. And like, if you, here's a little meter. If you are going into the magic, going into the work, whatever it is, and looking for something to happen to the point where you're getting frustrated, like nothing's happening, like, what, I've been doing this for like 5 days and I don't see anything, versus doing it for 5 days and you haven't seen anything happen and you're still excited, like you just are so excited that wanting to see something happen isn't even a thought in your mind. There's just this pure excitement of wanting more knowledge, but, and so you're not even thinking about nothing hasn't happened in 5 days, because you are just wanting the knowledge, you are just wanting it. So if you're upset and frustrated, I would stop.
Right. So again, finding that thing which is life-giving for you, that thing which brings excitement, which brings joy, which brings that hunger and that pursuit for you, then for each individual, then becomes kind of a programming, which okay, to bring us full circle, because we need to finish up here, but to bring us full circle, which is where I think religion and cults are so dangerous, because you're surrendering yourself, your authentic self, to the whims and will and desire of someone else. And I understand a little bit, psychologically what motivates people to do that. I think it's interesting. Some people choose to join cults. You were born into it. So that's a lot different. But I think if there's anything that I can take away from our time together, and that I would want people to take away, is that honoring the self and honoring your own personhood, your own individuality and dignity, and saying, I'm not going to place someone else or someone else's opinion above that. I'm going to trust that our creator, was smart enough to put a sort of an internal guidance system within my own heart. And if I can get in touch with those things, then I can accomplish, as you mentioned, those soul contracts or things that I came here to accomplish. And I think that's one of the real dangers of religion or cults or politics or anything where you surrender your own unique sacredness as a human being to someone else who must know better or must be closer to God or must have, whatever.
Yep, that's it. And, once you can let go of those things, that's like you said, you got to shed all that stuff first. So if anybody is looking for a mentor or ritual to shed that old skin, let me know. But just know that once you start, you're in. That's it.
It's all or nothing. I think that's so great what you said about, you start something and then you're left in a holding pattern. I know in my own life, there were things, as you were saying that, I was thinking back, I can see where I did that, just, kind of out of the quest or out of the search, starting something, but not being fully committed to it, but being like, well, maybe this is it, maybe this isn't it, but not necessarily having that that hunger and that drive, like you're talking about, and then getting, you know, a little bit into it and then being like, oh, this isn't really for me. You know, it's one thing if you can walk away and say this isn't for me, but it's another thing if you're kind of left
Right.
in that sort of limbo place, which is really an uncomfortable and torturous at times
Yes.
place to be.
Yes.
So how would a person that's interested in mentoring or something, how would they, if how would they find you?
Well, if you want, I can send you a link to my website and
Be great.
give you my phone, and you could put it in the links below.
Yeah, I'll put it in the comments, as well as a link to your book. Kenyatta, thank you so much for spending your time with us tonight, and I really enjoyed the conversation, and maybe we can do it again.
Yes, thank you so much, Aaron. I enjoyed myself. It was a pleasure, and you have a wonderful, magical night, my friend.
Thank you. You do the same.
Okay.
Goals of spiritual conversations is to expose people to different spiritual paths and ideas. And I think we certainly accomplished that tonight. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, I hope that you'll do so. And I hope you'll hit the like buttons and comment below. I'm including in the comments below information to get a hold of Kenyatta if you'd like to. And again, thank you for joining me.